And this is, by the way, done by a YouTube channel. The name of it is Civilian Rifleman. I want to give credit where credit is due, of course.
Every single day, a war is being waged that operates on a plane most of us fail to perceive. It's a conflict not for territory, but for the control of the cognitive space. This is not a battle for land, it's a battle for your mind. We are living in an era of what military theorists call fifth-generational warfare, and it is an invisible, pervasive conflict that actively shapes your perception of reality and, to some extent, your daily life as well. This video will provide an overview of this new battlefield, the weapons being used against you, and the strategies that you can adopt to defend your own mind. As always, a very special thanks to our channel members and Patreon members. You guys help the channel out a lot. And if you're in the market for rifle slings or ranger beads, check out the Civilian Rifleman Etsy store. To comprehend the nature of our current predicament, we must first understand the evolution of conflict. The framework of the generations of warfare was first articulated in 1989, and it provides us with a basic lens through which we can view this progression. First generational warfare was defined by order and manpower. This was the age of line and column tactics, where armies of men with smoothbore muskets faced each other across open ground, and battles were largely contests of attrition governed by strict drills and formations. The battlefield was a clearly defined physical space. When we fast forward to the Industrial Revolution, we can see it gave birth to second generational warfare, epitomized by the maxim firepower kills. The invention of the machine gun and the advent of indirect artillery fire created a new reality of massed industrial-scale attrition. The horrifying peak of this era was the First World War, where static trench lines stretched for hundreds of miles and victory was measured in inches of mud gained at an appalling human cost. Third generational warfare was a direct response to the stalemate of the trenches in World War I. It was a war of speed, maneuver, and dislocation. Tactics like the German Blitzkrieg utilized emerging technologies like tanks and aircraft, not only to overwhelm an enemy, but to bypass their front lines, penetrate deep into their rear, and cause a systemic collapse. This was about outmaneuvering an opponent on a physical map. With fourth generational warfare, the lines began to blur a bit. The state lost its monopoly on war because national armies found themselves confronting non-state actors like insurgents, terrorists, and guerrilla forces who did not adhere to traditional rules of engagement. This was the era of asymmetric conflict, where the weaker party seeks to neutralize the technological superiority of the stronger. While still largely fought with kinetic weapons, this form of warfare leaned heavily on psychological operations, propaganda, and winning support of the civilian population. Now, ultimately, that brings us to the contemporary model that we're talking about today, fifth generational warfare. Some theorists contend that this is a paradigm shift where the very concepts of war and peace have become indistinct. Fifth generational warfare is described as a war of information and perception, and it's fought primarily with non-kinetic means, like sophisticated social engineering, weaponized misinformation, and pervasive cyber attacks. The objective is not to destroy an enemy's military, but to make their society ungovernable by eroding trust, sowing division, and manipulating the cognitive processes of its own citizens as well as foreign civilian populations. The battlefield is no longer a physical location. It's your social media feed. It's the news you consume and the very structure of your thoughts. So what are the weapons of this new form of conflict? They are not forged with steel, but from data. They are subtle, pervasive, and in many respects far more insidious. The primary weapon is information itself, or more accurately, the deliberate degradation of the information ecosystem. This is not simply about disseminating lies, it's about creating a fire hose of falsehood, which is an overwhelming flood of contradictory and emotionally charged information designed to create so much noise that the signal of truth is completely lost. The strategic objective of this disinformation is not necessarily to make you believe a falsehood, but to exhaust your critical faculties and lead you to doubt the objective truth is even discoverable. This erodes public trust in foundational institutions like media, science, government, and ultimately your own judgment. Another weapon
I just want to stop there for a second because he's talking about eroding trust in traditional institutions, finance, pharma, government, etc. Now
Everything.
everything, right? Now this is almost being presented. You got to be careful because it's almost being presented from the side of like if bad guys were doing it. But think about this through the lens of purposely doing it to erode the trust in the institutions which we know to be are all corrupted, the decentralization of everything. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right.
Weapon is social engineering, which is amplified significantly by technology. This strategy does not invent new societal problems. It identifies and exploits existing social, political, and economic fault lines. Grievances are methodically amplified, turning disagreements into unbridged divisions and divisions into tribal hatred. This is not the crude propaganda of the 20th century. Today, it is hyper-personalized, and it's a practice known as computational propaganda. By 2026, artificial intelligence has supercharged these efforts. AI algorithms construct detailed psychological profiles based on our digital footprint, including our browsing history, social media activity, and consumer behavior. This allows an adversary to craft and deliver messages tailored with frightening precision to an individual's specific fears and bias. They can generate automated text, synthetic audio, and convincing deepfake videos at an industrial scale, which creates an entire ecosystem of false narratives designed for mass manipulation. On top of all of this, there's also cyber attacks, which have been repurposed from tools of espionage and theft into instruments of strategic control. In this context, hacking is not just about stealing data. It's about disrupting the foundational infrastructure of a nation. A single actor or a state-sponsored proxy can inflict chaos from thousands of miles away. In 2021, for example, there was a ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline, and it's a stark case study that we can examine. Hackers gained access via a single compromised password on a system lacking multi-factor authentication. They then stole nearly 100 gigabytes of data and deployed ransomware that crippled the pipeline's billing systems. To contain the threat, the company shut down the pipeline, which supplied 45% of the fuel to the U.S. East Coast, and the result was widespread fuel shortages, panic buying, and significant economic disruption, which was all achieved without a single shot fired. The truly insidious nature of these weapons is their ambiguity. The lines between war and peace have dissolved into a state of perpetual, low-level conflict because attacks are often conducted by anonymous or proxy groups, with definitive attribution being nearly impossible, which allows instigators to maintain plausible deniability. And while the conflict is primarily informational, it can and does spill over into the physical world by sparking protests, violence, and societal breakdown. So why does this theoretical model of warfare demand your attention? It's because it is the new battle space, and you're not actually a civilian observer. You are the primary target, and your mind is the contested territory. Consider the intense political polarization that has come to define modern society. This phenomenon, which researchers have called affective polarization, goes beyond mere policy disagreements. It's a deep-seated animosity towards those in the opposing political group. While social media is not the sole cause, studies do show it significantly intensifies the division, and the algorithmic amplification of outrage and the creation of echo chambers are not unfortunate byproducts. They are actually features that are being actively exploited. The strategic goal is to sow chaos and division, which turns citizens against each other to shred the social fabric that holds a nation together. Living in this state of constant cognitive and emotional assault is profoundly taxing.
By the way, I would argue that's exactly where we were before the Q operation started.
I remember deeply.
In a state of perpetual manufactured division, that's when they had the power to use engineered narratives along with the NGO-funded agitators to spark protests wherever they want. Like, that's all the stuff that we've torn down.
I could argue.
Sorry, all good.
It induces what psychologists term information overload, which is a state of cognitive fatigue that degrades decision-making and increases anxiety and powerlessness. This environment is perfectly engineered to exploit our innate cognitive bias. Biases like confirmation bias, which is our tendency to favor information that supports our existing beliefs, are no longer just mental shortcuts. They're actually vulnerabilities to be targeted. Every emotional reaction, every unthinking share, becomes data that is harvested to refine the very weapons being aimed back at you. The battlefield has translocated from physical domains into the fabric of our daily lives and, most critically, into our cognitive processes. The objective is no longer the conquest of a state, but its implosion under the weight of its own internal divisions. In this war, every citizen is on the front lines. The scope of this challenge can feel overwhelming and even dystopian in a way, which it kind of is. But powerlessness is a strategic objective of the adversary. The first and most crucial act of defense is to simply understand the nature of the conflict you're in. You can't win a war you don't know is being fought. So how does one resist? The defense, frankly, is a disciplined and fortified mind. First, you need to treat your own mind as your most critical asset and practice what can be called informational hygiene. Before you accept, and most importantly, before you amplify any piece of information, subject it to a simple and rigorous protocol. Who's the source? What is their motivation for telling me this? And who benefits if I believe and share this? Cultivate a habit of skepticism and verify claims across multiple reputable sources before accepting them as true. Second, you need to understand the terrain of your own psychology. In this war, that terrain is your set of inherent cognitive biases. What topics provoke an immediate emotional response in you? What narratives are you predisposed to believe? Being honest with yourself about your own vulnerabilities is a prerequisite for defending against their exploitation. Consciously stepping away from the 24/7 fire hose of information is not an act of ignorance. It's actually a strategic maneuver to create the cognitive space that is required for self-awareness and rational thought. Finally, harden your digital life. This extends beyond basic cyber hygiene like strong passwords and two-factor authentication, which are very important, but it means developing a conscious and strategic approach to your digital footprint. Be judicious about the data that you share and understand the privacy settings of the platforms that you use. This analysis is ultimately a call for elevated awareness. The character of conflict has fundamentally changed. We're living in a historic moment where the most decisive battles are not fought with kinetic weapons, but with narratives, perceptions, and information. Understanding the playbook of fifth-generational warfare is the key to rendering its tactics impotent. By sharpening our critical faculties, understanding our own psychological vulnerabilities, and reinforcing the bonds of our communities, we can mount a formidable defense. We can, and must, reclaim the sovereignty of our own reality. You are a combatant in this war, whether you choose to be or not. Your first and most solemn duty is to secure the territory of your own mind. If you did find this analysis...
All right. Now, what I want people to understand is, if you think about it, Joe, if you listen to that on the surface, it sounds like, oh my God, like we're screwed, we don't stand a chance, right? But if you listen to what he's saying, is he's saying that understanding the manipulation is the key to rendering it ineffective. So if you think about it, they were using fifth generation warfare on us arguably since the early 2000s, right? The dawn of the social media era, the dawn of the information age. What's the first thing that Trump did when he started coming down the escalator? He started talking about fake news. And now if you look at where we sit and going through COVID, we all learned about manipulated information and manipulated drug trials and all these other things. They're using fifth generation warfare to render it ineffective against the mass society. You're muted, bro.
Sorry about that. Guys, my son called. The funny